this speech is basically sort of a sequel to the Human Societies and Computer Networks speech I made. So, will software freedom ever reach the, quote, normies, unquote? See, here's the thing. The way I found out about software freedom, the philosophy, free software, and all that, is because I was interested in computers, and as I looked further and further into the computers, discovered new things, I eventually came across the free software and the ideas. And those ideas, so, and not even anytime soon, I had already been interested in computers and doing all kinds of things, looking into them for a long time before I ever even heard about even using the GNU plus Linux operating system and any philosophies that might go along with it. So then, if it takes all of this to use to be aware of software freedom even existing, to first spend years being interested in computers and looking into computer things, to before even realizing that something like this exists. So, what would it take for the general population to ever become aware of this? What could it possibly... It seems like a monumental task to even imagine that the general population would ever even find out that software freedom is a thing. Because I was interested in computers and I was doing all kinds of computer things for a long time before I ever came to know about software freedom, GNU plus Linux operating systems and all that. So, how on earth could possibly the general population, the normies as they are called, be made aware of this? What could be done? Is it even possible? What are the solutions? I don't know. This piece is just me wondering about this. See, the problem is that for the general population to come aware, it would need to have a different route. The information would need to have a different route of reaching the general population than it does for someone like me who found out about software freedom because I was interested in computers, and from that interest I looked into things and found software freedom. So with me there was a reason for me to go and seek that information, but the general population, they are not interested in computers, so they will never come across the information like I did. They would never pay attention, even if it showed up somehow. They wouldn't pay attention and they would just look the other way, because they are not interested in such things. So what could possibly be done to make them interested? Is there a way at all to do so? Should it be done at all? Is there another way to bring software freedom to the people? Well, probably not, because the people should be aware. Because even if there was a hypothetical scenario where everyone would be given software, free software right now, as Richard Stallman likes to say, 5 years from now they might not have free software anymore because they wouldn't bother holding on to the software, because if they don't know about the values of software freedom, then they don't see any reason why should they bother staying with free software. If another software, a proprietary one, shows up and does the work better than a free software program, then the people would just switch to that proprietary software because they don't know why should they stay with the practically inferior free software program. Because they don't have an incentive. They don't have any incentive to stay with the free program. Because why would they? If the proprietary software does the job better. So they need to know about the values of software freedom. So that is an essential thing for someone who wants to promote software freedom. They need to promote the actual freedom and the values. It's not enough to give It's not enough to give free software to the people. Simply giving someone a copy of a free program isn't enough. installing GNU plus Linux isn't enough. That's an important part of it, and you should absolutely install GNU plus Linux on all the people's computers and do that. That's an important thing, of course, because, well, you can't really practice software freedom if you don't have free software. But it's not enough. They need to know about software freedom, is what I'm talking about. So, what then? How should software freedom be spread? Well, there is one possibility. It could be spread to friends. If you have friends, which is not a guaranteed fact, then you could try and convince your friends. But it's gonna take a lot of convincing. But perhaps it can be done. But that's the friends. Let's say you have... I'll just pick a number. 12. Whatever. 12 is a number. Now let's say you tell 12 people about software freedom. Can you spread it any further if that's the amount of people you know, and you can't possibly spread it any further? You just don't know anyone, and anyone else you might want to talk to, they're not gonna listen to you because they don't know you and they don't care about. So whatever. Let's say 12 people is the number of people you talk to. Well, what about everyone else? Can you expect your friends to also spread the message of software freedom? Well, you would need to convince them quite well to get them to the point that they would also go around spreading software freedom. It's already a lot of work to convince someone of something like this in the first place, but to then have them actually spread the information even further themselves it's asking a lot. It's really asking a lot. That's on the level of a religion. It would take a cult. I'm not ruling that out as a possibility that it might take a cult to spread the software freedom. What could possibly be done? There is one another way I might think of, and I'm just talking about hypotheticals. How practical these are and how likely these are to happen, I have no idea. I'm just exploring the possibilities, just thinking about this, wondering out loud, basically. One possibility might be, if there is some politically influential person, someone who has let's put it this way, someone who has a reach, media reach, they can draw attention in media, news and all that. Someone who is influential in the media and can basically make a big story. That might be one way to potentially bring awareness of the operating systems but not the operating systems, the philosophy, the software freedom is what I'm talking about. Merely the use of the operating system is not enough. It's not enough for people to be told that there is an alternative operating system to whatever proprietary trash they might be using. That's not enough. That's an important part, but that's not enough. What I'm talking about is the software freedom, the philosophy. The 4 freedoms. Richard Stallman's teachings, basically. That's what I'm talking about. So, media attention, maybe. It would need to have some sort of a influential figure who agrees with the software freedom values. And it also needs to be someone who it needs to have someone who actually agrees with the values enough to actually spread the values. Because it's not enough to talk about just the operating system. And if they talk about the quote, open source, unquote, that's detrimental. That's a bad thing. They can't talk about that. Basically, they have to be a purist in that they are specifically talking about software freedom. Now, what does it take? The amount of people in the world who are into this topic, into this issue, interested in this issue, it's not that many. So, it's not really a general thing, so it's not a generally widespread idea, so it would need to take place so that someone who is... Could it be spread to someone who is already in that position, or could someone who believes in these values rise to that position of political influence? Let's just call it that. Is it possible that someone could rise from being... Well, it's of course a point of view to call it rising, but let's say someone is some random person interested in computers who likes to just spend their free time alone in their room on their computers. Can that person then get up from there and appear before cameras and talk about something. It would be quite an achievement to get something like that done in general, regardless of the ideas being discussed. For any ideology, of course, everyone would like to have some attention in the media, right? So it's already something to do that at all. But it's gonna take an extra amount of effort and perhaps something else for someone interested in computers first. Because you have to keep in mind, these people are interested in computers first. Like I mentioned about myself. I'm interested in free software because I'm interested in computers first. Now, of course, priority-wise, software freedom is very important to me. But the way I came to know about software freedom is I first was interested in computers, and then the software freedom came from that. So it takes someone who is interested in computers to arrive to the position of even being aware of software freedom. So it is a prerequisite, basically, to know about computers and be interested in computers. So basically, the group of people who are into the software freedom need to be, or generally are, those who come from a computing background of some kind, whether hobbyists or whatever else. So what could be done? I'm just exploring thoughts, but I'm really having a difficulty coming up with anything that could be possibly remotely, like what could actually be done, like in practice, if we actually wanted to make it happen and not just think about it in abstract. What could actually be done in practice? What would I need to do right now? Get up from the seat and go somewhere to do something. What could I do to do something? No, there are the practical things. One could just improve the software, go and do some contributions to make the software practical. That's gonna attract attention from users potentially, because the better the software is, the more people will want to use it. That's reasonable. That's gonna attract people to use the operating system. But will it teach them the values of software freedom? If that's specifically the topic of this discussion, I'm not so sure. Because, well, there is this competitor in Mindshare, and I've already mentioned once, the quote, open source unquote, which I don't like to talk about much. But I will say this, it is potentially a competitor. In you contributing the software, you're making the software popular, but what will the users learn from using that program? They might learn a different idea. So they might not even learn your idea of software freedom, they might learn a competing idea. It's not necessarily competing objectively, but it is competing in mindshare, I imagine. But even if that's not the case, they still might not arrive to your idea, because unless you are actually explicitly promoting that idea, unless the use of that program itself promotes that idea, then simply contributing to the program isn't enough. It's also important to have good software, but it's still not enough. So even someone who is interested in computers, even if they might have skills to contribute to software, it still might not be enough to promote software freedom, because it's not inherently promoting the values just by making the software better. If someone who doesn't know about free software sees a program that is very high quality and is free software, they are still not going to learn about the values, and I have experience of this. I have used the GNU image manipulation program when I was still using Windows, Microsoft's Windows. And I had no idea of the software freedom philosophies, despite using the very GNU software. GNU is in the name, GNU image manipulation program, but I never bothered to look that up. Why would I? It's just a random image manipulation program. So even if, no matter how good the program is, it doesn't necessarily convey the message. It didn't for me. It might for some people, and I don't doubt that, but for me it didn't. So it's not enough to even contribute to the software. So what can be done? What can someone do? Just get up from the seat and do something. Who fucking knows? That is a big fucking mystery. It's just one of these mysteries of the world. Mysteries of the universe. What can actually be done? The talking to the friends, like, that's one of the bestest ideas. I can think of. One of the only more reasonable ideas, as much as I might try it, making some sort of content on the internet might be useful, but it takes something very specific that the likes of the YouTube algorithms and all that sort of thing pick up on. It takes these specific fucking edits you have to have in your videos and all kinds of... Like, if you look at what's popular on YouTube, like the most subscribed channel that is not some company is like the Mr. Beast channel. Like, that content is nonsense. That's just nonsense. If that's what's popular, then simply talking about random stuff on YouTube isn't quite enough either. Will it really get recommended to anyone? Probably not. Chances are that any viewers you might get from talking about some free software things are people who are already interested in free software, so because those are the people who would look that stuff up, so the only people who might come to there is people who are already looking for that stuff, already knowing about it in advance, so you wouldn't be spreading the message to any new people. Now, channels that might get popular talking about software, like talking about the GNU plus Linux operating system in general, popular channels even have like hundreds of thousands of subscribers. Well, of course they never talk about the software freedom philosophy. You know what they talk about? They talk about the bad word, quote, open source, unquote. That's what they talk about. They mention that repeatedly. They have hundreds of thousands of subscribers. So, what ideas are they promoting? Well, not software freedom. So, that's as good as useless. Sure, it might get some users for the platform, and yeah, that is better. There are indirect benefits to having more and more users. The more and more users there are, at least there's a chance that the ideas might find some indirect way of reaching new audiences. So it's not necessarily a bad thing, but it's still not good enough. So, and also, like what would it take? Well, I have no idea. I'm still thinking, but I'm trying to think about solutions. What could it possibly be? On the topic of Mr. Beast style nonsense, I wonder if it's a possibility to have like this almost like a clickbait type of a situation where like someone makes some videos that have like these appeals to the YouTube algorithm and all that, and then in the middle there's like this message, almost like a sponsor thing. Now that sounds like someone might interpret that as some sort of a desperate move, but I don't give a shit about something like that. All I'm interested in is spreading the software freedom ideology, basically. So whatever tactics, no matter how petty, I don't care. I just want to spread the idea. So if we can trick people to watching some random trash on the YouTube, and then there are these hidden messages inserted throughout the video, basically like, I don't know, is it comparable to some kind of a propaganda campaign? I don't fucking know. Probably not, because propaganda is a very specific term, it means very specific things, so probably not. But it is something. I wonder if that's a possibility. Could someone have that sort of thing done, and then basically like that's an interesting idea. I'm not ruling that as a possibility. That's an interesting idea. If someone could either convince an existing, like a YouTuber type on the internet, or create a new channel and start like doing some whatever random nonsense. It doesn't have to have anything to do with computers and software freedom. Just completely random nonsense, irrelevant entirely. But then just spam these messages in the video. That would be an interesting idea. But of course, it's not really a nice tactic. It's not honorable at all. So I'm not necessarily considering it a good idea. But I wonder if it's a possibility. Yeah, it is not honorable to do something. That's kind of cringe. But still, it's still something interesting to think about. But really, what would it take? What would it take? I have no idea. I'm trying to think about solutions, but I just don't. I don't know. There are like things like having companies to force them to make free software. Well, that would need legislation, state legislation. Well, how on earth do you enact state legislation if you are a really small idea with a very small amount of people supporting that idea, like some very obscure small amount of people supporting some idea? That's not gonna get anyone interested. What chances are there that some a state would enact such policy, basically regulate the computer market to the point that no proprietary software is allowed? Well, that's a Herculean task. It's not happening. I don't see that happening. Might happen someday, who knows? But chances are that something like that would require public support. But even then, that's assuming that public support works. Ideally, in a democracy, the majority of the people should get their way. But many countries don't have really functional democracies, so many countries have illusions of democracy. They have these facades that pretend to be democracies, but they are really not democracies. Even if they have some democratic features, a lot of the influence still is held by some other people. Anyway, regardless, I'm not gonna talk about that topic now. That's not what this speech is about. This speech is about software freedom. So, even if hypothetically the vast majority of the people agreed, that might not still be enough, because, well, that to get the people to get what they want, that would require the state to do what the people want. So that's not a given. And there is the obvious prerequisite. Well, the people have to want it. How on earth do we get the people to want for something that they are supposed to know, that they are supposed to become aware of because of the regulation? It's a circle, it doesn't work. So the people are supposed to become aware of software freedom by promoting the software freedom in the form of banning proprietary software. But that's supposed to happen because the people are already in favor of such legislation, so that's a circle, that doesn't work, that's a failure. That's just a broken idea, that doesn't work. To get the people to become aware of free software requires them to already support the tool that makes them aware of the software, so it doesn't work, that's a failure. Something else has to be done. The prerequisite hasn't been met. What can be done to spread the idea of software freedom? I have no idea. I have no fucking idea. I can't think of anything. Except these random, abstract, arbitrary scenarios. Might as well be nonsense fiction. I can't think of anything. There are these indirect maybe they are the best way we have, I don't know. Maybe just contributing the software, making it better. There might be a chance. Maybe someone who uses GIMP on Windows decides to look GNU up. I didn't, but maybe someone might. So, like, that's just not. Maybe that's the best we've got. I don't know. I just don't know. Like, well, I don't know. Maybe that is what you should do. Try to contribute to the software as much as possible. Or actually, I think I might already have the solution. Or rather, I'm just gonna stick to the thing that I've been thinking about. Or rather, this page hasn't really achieved anything. I'm just gonna retain my previous assumption. I'll just say that. Well, do what you fucking can. Whatever you can think of, just do it. Whatever you think might make people... Whatever you think might make people aware of the software freedom, just do that. I don't know. It doesn't really... Well, I don't see how much could hurt anything. Unless, of course, you're talking about wrong ideas, using the wrong terminology and promoting the wrong movements. Well, of course, that's harmful, but as long as you're talking about software freedom, and not the enemy of software freedom, any of the enemies, then as long as you're promoting the software freedom, I don't see how any of it could be harmful, so do what you fucking can, do anything you can, everything you can. So anything you can think of, just do it. Do everything. If software freedom is important to you, then you should do everything you can to do it, to help it. So whatever it is in your power, you just dedicate your time and effort to it. You just whatever you can think of. Oh, I know of some new way they do this to promote the values, then just do it. If you thought about something, then just do it. Promote the values, promote the freedom. Yes. I can't think of any other solution other than to just tell you to figure it out yourself. Yeah. I guess that's the ultimate conclusion of this speech. It might as well be useless. It's just an exploration of these ideas. Just to point out that all of these ideas are just impossible. Fictional, hypothetical scenarios that might as well be a fantasy. They have no grounds in reality. Do what you fucking can. Figure out yourself. I don't know. Whatever it is in your power to do, you do that. Right. Well, that's the end of this piece.